Alright guys, I'm about to share an opinion. People aren't gonna like. Well, it's not really an opinion, more as just what I believe as a Christian. So, if you don't want to hear this opinion, I guess don't watch this video. If you're gonna be offended, don't watch this video. But, for me, I think it's just important to be said. So, people have asked me before, you know, what my horoscope is and all of that stuff. And one person particularly asked me, and I responded as respectfully as I could, basically saying I don't believe in horoscopes and I don't practice them. And she kind of responded back with like a nasty-ish, like, that's not answering the question. And basically, if you really want to know, I don't use horoscopes because they are demonic. So, basically, I've just noticed, well, I shouldn't say I just noticed, but it's coming to light how many, like a bunch of celebrities are heavily into witchcraft and New Age. For those of y'all who don't know what New Age is, they're basically spirituality practices that are basically pagan practices, but they're all heavily tied to forms of witchcraft, which a lot of people are very ignorant about because they just see, you know, tarot cards and crystals and meditation and horoscopes as just these fun little things you do to learn and understand yourself more. But as a Christian, there's a lot more to it than people recognize. And they really do come from demonic things that when you actually look into the root of where these practices come from, it's very easy to see. So I watched this other creator who basically made a video saying like, why are there so many witches in Hollywood? And that Hollywood, the name itself, is a wood that was used to create wands for people who practice witchcraft. So it's like in the name itself is witchcraft. People are gonna be like, you're crazy, you're a Christian. It's not that deep, but it is. So basically, I've talked a lot about how demonic Hollywood is. And when I say that, I don't mean like individual people. Yes, there are people actively in Hollywood who do worship the devil. Satanists are a real thing. And I feel like people never acknowledge that there's literal groups of people who worship and believe in Satan and use their worship of Satan to do evil things, such as blood sacrifices, whether it's animals, humans. I told you that there were Satanists who pretty much said the religion requires them to be able to abort their babies as human sacrifices for their religion. People don't want to hear that, but that's a very real thing. So I definitely think for me as a Christian, I stay away from all of that stuff. Even yoga is actually tied to these Hindu gods. Like yoga is technically a religious practice for Hindus, and they were doing these poses as worship of different gods in Hinduism. So participating in yoga, like I watched this woman's testimony who was an ex-witch who talked about how she had to get deliverance from how many years from doing yoga for so many years. And she, like, yoga is yoking yourself to these Hindu gods. So practicing yoga as a Christian is not something I would recommend. For that reason, you are pretty much worshiping these idols that are the hundreds and thousands of Hindu gods that exist in that religion. And as we know, any god that is not the God of the Bible is a false god. So yeah, doing yoga is a form of worship for Hindu gods. Tarot cards are pretty much a form of witchcraft as well. And in this video, she just pointed out how many celebrities just like talk about tarot cards, crystals, meditation, doing, what's the other one called? It's just like, it's so heavily ingrained into celebrity spaces, and I feel like it is a religion, but people don't recognize it as a religion because, anytime someone's like talking about the universe or your higher self, these are all terms that are used in new age new age practices that are not rooted in God or the Bible. They also come from demonic things such as witchcraft. There are a lot of celebrities now that just openly practice witchcraft. There's a lot of people who joke about being witches. Joke, but also are serious about being witches and casting spells and doing all these things. And as a Christian, you have to recognize that witchcraft is not of God. That does not come from God. God does not tell any Christian to practice witchcraft. So there's that. I also just think in general, using crystals or believing in crystals is also just another form of idolatry. You're trusting a crystal for healing instead of trusting God for healing. You're trusting a crystal for protection instead of trusting God for protection. So as a Christian, dabbling in this stuff is basically creating an idol out of something that God did not create for the purpose of worship. But also, it's just another distraction from actually following God and following the Bible. So I've talked about why I don't believe in horoscopes. I've talked about it from like not the spiritual level of it, but tarot cards are actually all connected to demons. So not tarot cards, horoscopes. Each horoscope is actually connected to a demon. It's connected to a false god, which a false god is a demon. There were demons that were cast out of heaven that basically knew of spiritual things, and they wanted to be like God, so they made themselves gods here on earth, but they're not the one true living God. So these demons are what you are aligning yourself with if you are claiming or coming into agreement with a horoscope. Like, horoscopes are not aligned. Horoscopes are aligning yourself with a demonic entity, essentially. And a lot of people don't realize that. They just think, oh, it's just a fun little thing you can do to learn more about yourself. First of all, you don't get I feel like believing in horoscopes is one thing, right? I feel like if you are trusting that a horoscope can tell you more about yourself and tell you about your future, it's like these things are all connected. Like, they're all connected because they're all are actually come from occult practices that are based in witchcraft. So people don't realize, like, tarot cards, crystals, meditation, incantations, all of these things are connected to the occult, which is rooted in witchcraft, which is rooted in demonic spirits. So they might come off as just fun little things you can do, but they actually have a very dark history, and they're also, not of God. I feel like as a Christian, you shouldn't be participating in those things. Obviously, someone who isn't a Christian is going to have a very different opinion on this because they don't believe in God. They don't believe in the Bible and what the Bible says about the world or things in the world. So I can't convince someone who doesn't have the same perspective to believe it. But if you watch there's literally so many testimonies of Christians on YouTube who left New Age, who left witchcraft, who left, doing horoscopes and crystals and all these things in New Age that they said they realized after doing it for years were actually demonic. And they didn't believe they were demonic until they found Jesus. And then once they found Jesus was when all of the veil was lifted off of what they were doing, and that they were partaking in these very demonic things that are created to take people away from the will of God, but also created to take people away from trusting God and believing in God. So divination is basically what tarot cards are, trusting your fate. If I pull this card, this is going to tell me my future. But they always come with a cost. And I just remember a lot of people saying, like, even people who openly practice witchcraft and claim to be witches and stuff, and they like do spells on people and think like they have all of this power. I remember someone saying, it comes with a cost. Like, they might think they have so much power in the world being a witch and doing all of these things, and it's temporary, because it really is, it's demonic. Satan is using those things in people's life to keep them from knowing the truth of the gospel and of God and of Jesus. But also, he understands the consequences of participating in those things, and that participating in those things allows certain consequences to happen in that person's life. Because at the end of the day, Satan is no one's friend. He is the enemy of every person. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy. So people who participate in witchcraft, thinking that they're gaining all of these things and have all this power, all this control over their life, it's short-lived, because eventually the consequences, the fruits, they're going to reap what they've been sowing. And especially someone who's wishing harm. Now you can say, well, I'm a good witch. I'm just wishing for peace and health or whatever. No such thing. You're either following God's will or you're following your will. And your will is what you're doing when you're practicing witchcraft, not the will of God. Because the will of God does not tell you to do witchcraft. It tells you to put your faith in Jesus. So anyways, I just wanted to share that. That is why I do not participate in those things. I do not believe in horoscopes. I do not claim my horoscope. I don't dabble or care about crystals. They're pretty. If they're pretty to look at. I do have like a Himalayan salt lamp in my room, which I don't use it for other than it's just a nice light I like to have in my room. But I'm not believing that this rock is going to do something for me, or give me something, or heal me, or anything. It's just a rock, So I feel like for a lot of people, it's hard to see that, because people like feeling like they have a lot of control and power. They want to see themselves as these powerful people that can, impact and make change. But I feel like the roots of it are very dark. But I also feel like something that can also be used for evil cannot be purely good. No one's ever, believing in Jesus is not ever going to be like, I can use Jesus, I can do harm by believing in Jesus, right? Or following the commandments, right? The commandments are all of these moral laws that require you to live a life that is holy and righteous and pure and good. You're not causing harm to others when you're following the commandments that Jesus gave. Because Jesus lived a perfect, holy, righteous life. That's the example Christians are called to follow. There's no part of anything the Bible calls Christians to do that is to cause harm or to commit any sort of evil. So on the opposite hand, people who are actively participating in New Age it can be used to cause harm, you know? Witches cast spells. Witches cast curses on people. And actively try to do harm to other people. You know? Something that can also be used to do evil does not come from God, period. But honestly, I would argue that none of it is doing good, because all of it is just taking people away from the will of God. And when you're away from the will of God, you're going to deal with consequences. You're going to experience pain and suffering. And really, it's just like, to be separate from God as a Christian is actually the worst consequence you can actually experience. Like, for me as a Christian, I would hate to be out of God's presence, because having God on my side is the greatest feeling I have as a Christian. It's like knowing that the God who created the universe loves and cares for me matters more than doing tarot cards or having any of that stuff. So I just wanted to share that. I know some people are not going to like this opinion or not like what I'm saying, and you know, that's okay. But I'm just saying what I believe as a Christian, based off of my faith. I can't obviously control what other people do with their lives, but if you're a Christian who is practicing or participating in those things, I would strongly warn against that, because it is not biblically good to participate in those things. So that's all I'm going to say.